On today's show, the Kings have a new big man on the block. We'll look ahead to the upcoming NBA draft, and it's everyone's favorite Kings topic, more trade talk. All that and more on the Royal Report.
Welcome. Good morning. This just in, Shaq is out and we are in. Welcome back to Royal Rebounds, a YouTube channel for fans by fans. If you're a Kings fan, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you enjoy fresh Kings content, consider subscribing to the channel.
Welcome back, Royal family. Thanks for joining us on another fantastic Friday. We'll kick things off the same way we always do here with some news and highlights from around the league. Many NBA fans, especially Warriors fans, got exactly what they have been long waiting for last Sunday when Klay Thompson made his return to the court in San Francisco against the Cavs. It had been 941 days since his last game action following two catastrophic injuries. Thompson showed flashes of his old self, scoring 17 points in 20 minutes as the Warriors got the win. Golden State now appears ready for another deep playoff run, boasting one of the league's best offenses and defenses before adding the three-time champ back into the lineup. The Dubs will look to get back on track tonight in Chicago after dropping their last two games to Memphis and Milwaukee. Barry, as Thompson returns, it was announced that another big-name Western Conference guard will be missing considerably more time.
Yes, that's very true. 3 games back for Klay Thompson. He's averaging just about 14 points a game, 35% shooting from three-point range. But as you mentioned, yes, unfortunately, Damian Lillard is now out. He had surgery on that abdominal muscle. Many people were hopeful that he'd be back in the 6 to 8 week time frame, but head coach Chauncey Billups does not share the same optimism. He's been quoted saying he's not sure if Dame will be ready to return this season, Cal.
Yeah, it's unfortunate to hear lots of big-name players have missed a lot of time this season, and now Damian Lillard is the newest member of that list. Dame has long been on the Knicks' radar, but for now, New York will have to settle for Cam Reddish. The Knicks acquired Reddish, Solomon Hill, and a 2025 second-round pick from Atlanta for Kevin Knox and a 2022 first-round pick. Reddish, just 22, is averaging a career-high 12 points per game, while improving his three-point shooting from 26% last year to 38% this season. New York will also be reuniting Cam with his former college teammate, R.J. Barrett. The Knicks are 21-21, tied with Boston for the 10th seed and final play-in spot in the East. Barry, does this trade improve New York's playoff chances?
I think it definitely does help improve this team. Kevin Knox, as good of a young player he's been relegated to the bench on this Knicks team. And we all know that future first-round picks do not win basketball games. This is a huge acquisition for the Knicks. Unfortunately, the Kings were not able to get involved in this trade deal. But I think you're right. I think this definitely helps the Knicks' playoff chances. Moving on here, Bol Bol has been traded to the Detroit Pistons. Oh, wait. No, he is not. After a failed physical, Detroit has rescinded the trade between the two teams, including a second-round pick and Rodney McGruder. Now Bol Bol is sent back to Denver, and many fans are wondering, where will he be next, Cal?
Yeah, it's a good question. He is now open on the trade market again. It reminds me of last season in Sacramento when the Kings thought they had a deal in place for Dante DiVincenzo from Milwaukee, and it ended up failing as well. Let's move on to this Weekcap here for the Kings, Barry.
Yeah, speaking of failures, another failure or week of basketball for your Sacramento Kings. This is 2 weeks in a row of 1-3 ball. They capped off a 5-game losing streak. They were able to break that against the Lakers on Wednesday night, but it included losses against the Denver Nuggets, the Portland Trail Blazers, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. We saw some big games by De'Aaron Fox, by Tyrese Haliburton, a nice double-double by Alex Len. Rashaan Holmes is still out due to the COVID protocols. We also saw Damian Jones sidelined as well. But, the week ended on a positive note with a win against the Lakers. Many Kings fans are always excited, myself included, to beat a Lakers team, especially one with LeBron James and with high hopes for the playoffs. We also got to see Harrison Barnes return back to form with 23 big points, Cal, against the Lakers.
Yeah, that was huge for Sacramento. Obviously, the week started off very disappointing with the two terrible losses to Denver and Portland, but the Kings were able to gain a little bit of momentum ending the week. That Cavs game was a very closely contested one. They had the opportunity to win it at the end. And then, of course, a big win, as you mentioned, over the hated LA Lakers. Fox is still playing really, really well. Tyrese is shooting lights out, and Harrison Barnes may have regained some of that form that we saw from him earlier on in the season. I think style of play that we saw against the Lakers is going to be something to watch for this Kings team going forward. They didn't have a traditional big man inside, which allowed them to space out the court more, and that equals playing faster, opening it up for Fox to attack, and transition easy baskets, transition threes for guys like Harrison Barnes and Buddy Hield.
Yeah, speaking of big men, as I mentioned, Rashaan Holmes has been sidelined due to COVID protocols, and we got to see some other guys step up.
We certainly did. Sacramento has once again been forced to shuffle around their lineups and rotations with big men Rashaan Holmes, Damian Jones, and Tristan Thompson all missing games in the last 2 weeks. This has given opportunities for Chimezie Metu and Marvin Bagley to gain bigger roles within the offense, as well as Queta to have his first opportunity at real playing time in the NBA. Queta impressed a lot of people with his performance against the Cleveland Cavaliers on Monday. Alvin Gentry decided to play the rookie to close out a tight game against one of the best front courts in the league, while Metu and Bagley started alongside each other and both played very well in the Kings' win over the Lakers on Wednesday. Barry, what stood out to you the most from the Kings' bigs this week?
Well, I think it's defense and floor spacing. We saw Metu hit a couple threes. We saw Marvin Bagley make a three this week. But the big thing for me has been defense. We saw a bunch of blocks. It seems like it's much harder to score on this Kings team, or in the paint against this Kings team. And, just excited to see these young guys stepping up. Also, I got to give a shout out to Marvin Bagley on the glass. He's been rebounding much better, and that's really, really been helping this Kings team.
It certainly has. Metu and Bagley, particularly in the Lakers game, they both played very well. We already talked about how the style of play perhaps helps this team when they open the floor up like that. And if those two guys can hit shots from the outside, that's a huge game changer for Sacramento. I was most impressed with Neemias Queta. The big man really seems like he is ready for NBA playing time consistently. I hope they don't send him back down to the G League anytime soon. He allows for rim protector inside, good rebounder, and defensively, I think he moves his feet very well and can cover a lot of ground for a 7-footer. This guy is, as advertised now coming out of college, being the defensive player of the year in his conference, Barry, and he really impressed me this week.
Yeah, it's good to see good young players get playing time in Sacramento and, make the best of the time that they are on the court. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to jump into the team needs for your Sacramento Kings. At 17-27, it's obvious the Sacramento Kings have some needs to fill, and they need to make some changes. Cal, we talked about defense, we talked about consistency, we talked about the 4 position, but what really stands out to you as immediate needs for this Kings team?
Well, the Kings have a lot of needs. There's no question about that. And that's one of the reasons why you're hearing that nearly every player on the roster is available in trade talks. I think the Kings have a lot of big questions to answer moving into the trade deadline and the upcoming offseason as well. Certainly, they need defensive stoppers, as you mentioned. I think they also need those types of players that can be culture changers in the black hole of playoff droughts that is Sacramento. But as I mentioned, those big questions are going to be something that Monty Mcnair is going to have a hard time dealing with. Things like, do they keep Fox and Haliburton together? Do Rashaan Holmes, Harrison Barnes, and Marvin Bagley have futures on this team? Who will they target as the head coach in the offseason? Those are all big, big questions that are going to ultimately make or break whether or not the Kings have success this year and for years to come.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that this Kings team can address all these needs all at once. I think you kind of have to separate them out and have immediate needs and long-term needs. Things like consistency and leadership are not something that you're just going to change overnight. However, filling positions, bringing in other guys, coaching changes, stuff like that can be done a little bit quicker. So it's going to be an exciting trade deadline. It's going to be an exciting offseason for your Sacramento Kings. And hopefully Monty can figure out a way to fix some of these issues and fill these needs for Sacramento.
Yeah, we certainly hope that it's going to be exciting. We don't want another trade deadline to come and pass without any major moves. Speaking of major moves, we are now into officially the second half of the NBA season, which means that the playoffs and then the NBA draft are right around the corner. Sacramento still has a shot at the play-in tournament, but they currently are on the outside looking in again and are projected to have the 8th pick in this upcoming draft in June. So, Barry, it's time to start asking questions like, who or what types of players will Monty Mcnair target in the draft, and will he continue to follow the formula of drafting best available player, or will he look to draft the best fit at whichever the pick the Kings hold?
Yeah, it's really tough to, try and look inside his mind and know exactly what he's thinking. So you can only really go by what he's said. And he said he's going to take best available, so that is still what I'm sticking with at this point. But, like you mentioned, we're projected at pick number 8. This could dramatically change. If this Kings team decides to blow it up, if they decide to send out a bunch of these guys, we could easily move a lot closer. If they want to add a guy like Ben Simmons or maybe some of these other veteran players or another all-star to this team, we could very well be out of the draft lottery if this Kings team is able to pick it up in the second half of the season. And then there's the draft lottery. We saw, the year they drafted Marvin Bagley, they weren't originally supposed to be the number 2 pick, but they ended up winning that draft lottery. So, even though you're slotted at the 8th position now, you always have a chance to get 1, 2, or 3 if you are in the draft lottery.
Yeah, the draft lottery is always a big chance, and we'll have to see how that plays out as well as the rest of the season. Are there any players right now, that are in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range that you think the Kings should look at if they are, in fact, going to be picking there?
I'm a big Patrick Baldwin Jr. fan. I think he would fit very, very well on this Kings team. I think he's athletic, he can rebound, he can play defense, and he can score. So I think he'd be a great addition to the Kings at pick number 8.
Yeah, I like that pick as well. I think another name to keep on watch for the Sacramento Kings is Ben Mathurin, sophomore wing out of Arizona who's having an amazing season. The Wildcats are outperforming all expectations there. He has good size. He can do a little bit of everything, very athletic, good shooter, played on the under-19 Canada team that ended up winning a bronze medal. This guy is really ascending right now, and he would fit a lot of needs that the Kings have as well.
Yeah, and we're talking about summertime, but let's talk about things the Kings can do right now to improve this team. Let's talk about trades and this trade deadline that's coming up in just a few weeks. The Kings seem to be mentioned in a new trade rumor every single week. When you're struggling, when you're not playing well, things like this are going to happen. We talked about the Celtics could be in a similar boat. The Pacers could be there. There's a lot of teams that are looking to make moves. There's a few guys, that the Kings have had talks about, or guys that I would like them to bring in. As far as the Celtics, I like Marcus Smart. I like Jaylen Brown. If they were to make a deal with, let's say, the Pistons to try and improve this season, I like a guy like Jeremy Grant to play the 4 for them. If they want to make a bigger splash, the Pacers have said that Miles Turner is available, Karis LeVert, Sabonis. If they have the right deal, they'd be willing to move, maybe 1 or 2 or all 3 of those guys. And then the games this weekend against the Rockets, we're going to get to see Christian Wood, Kevin Porter Jr., Eric Gordon, all productive players for their positions. And then if you were to make a big move, it's been mentioned that Tobias Harris might need to be included in any deal for Ben Simmons or any 76ers deal. So that makes the puzzle a little bit more complicated for Sacramento. And then a guy that I really like that I've talked about all season long is Lou Dort with the Thunder. They are not playing well. They didn't really have high expectations for this season, and we know they are collecting draft picks. So I think a guy like Lou Dort would fit very well on this Kings team, and I think he is somebody that they could have if they wanted him.
Yeah, all those names are good names to watch. I am starting to move away from the Ben Simmons deal just because of the Tobias Harris factor. That's a ton of money that has to be moved around, and I think it makes it unlikely for a lot of teams, let alone Sacramento, to cash in on a deal that would involve both of them. I'm going to add one name that you didn't mention who I think is at the top right now of my wish list, and that would be Jeremy Grant. I've heard a lot of rumors about the Pistons wanting to deal him. He makes a decent amount of money, but every proposed trade I've seen for him seems like you can get this guy for maybe a little less than what he's actually worth, and he would fit very, very well in this Kings roster. I think he solidifies the power forward position, really good scorer and athlete. And then the other guys that I'm really high on would be any of those Indiana players. I love Miles Turner. I'd be really happy with Sabonis as well. And Karis LeVert would be a great addition too.
Yeah, I know many Kings fans are just, wishing for a trade. They're demanding a trade. They want something to change, something to happen. But, we don't want a lateral move. We don't want to just make a trade to make a trade. Every trade that this Kings team makes needs to improve the roster, and they need to take their time. They need to make the calls, and they need to do their due diligence on these players, and they need to do what is best for this Kings team. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to go to my favorite section of the show where we answer questions from you, the fans.
Welcome back to the Royal Report. It is time to ring the bell and answer all your burning Sacramento Kings questions here with our fan mail in a segment we like to call Cowbell Questions. Let's get our first from producer Vinny.
Barry and Calvin, you guys were touting a trade of Buddy and Marvin for Karis LeVert and Miles Turner. I agree the Kings need to sweeten the pot to make it work. How about throwing in our number 1 pick, which will give us 2 players with proven experience?
Well, BV50, thank you so much for your question. I think this is a home run deal for the Kings if they can get up or get rid of guys like Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley and bring in 2 productive players like Miles Turner and Karis LeVert. I think it is a home run for them. I would be willing to put in a first-round pick, maybe even 2 to make this deal work.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I love this deal for the Kings, and if all it takes is adding 1 or maybe even 2 picks, a first and a second round, to get it done, then I'm doing this deal yesterday. This is exactly the type of trade that the Kings need. Next question.
With the emergence of Neemias Queta, does that make TT expendable?
Yeah, I think it potentially does. The Kings have a lot of logjam here at the center position. I really liked what I saw from Queta this week. Tristan Thompson, even when he was healthy or suited, he hasn't been playing the same regular minutes that we were used to seeing him earlier on in the season. The Kings need a rim protector at the center position. Queta fills that better than Thompson does. I think you could potentially use Tristan Thompson, in a deal here and free up some more minutes for Queta as well.
I like Queta a lot, but honestly, I think that Tristan Thompson has been expendable this entire time. I don't know if his plan was even to finish the year with Sacramento. He's on a large expiring contract. He's been a cheerleader for the Sacramento Kings team. He's tried to be a veteran leader for them. But honestly, I don't know if Monty's plan was just to bring him in to make a trade. Maybe he could be a salary filler to bring in another big name or a potential all-star. But I honestly don't know if Tristan Thompson was in this team's future from the start. Next question.
How would you rate Monty Mcnair's performance as GM of the Sacramento Kings?
That's a very, very tough question. There's 2 things that I'm very, very critical of with Monty, and that is the botched trade of Bogdan Bogdanovic to the Bucks for Dante DiVincenzo that fell apart. I think he did a horrible job in that, and honestly, that might not all be his fault. The other thing is the trade to the Lakers. Buddy Hield traded for Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Montrezl Harrell. Again, probably not Monty's fault, but things like that make you look down on a GM. Things like that make other GMs in the league look at your guy and say, what are you doing over there? Without those, I think he's done a decent job. He's brought in some guys, not a lot, just a few guys. He hasn't handicapped us for the future. He hasn't traded away all these draft picks, and he hasn't really signed anybody to a bad contract. He was able to lock up De'Aaron Fox long term, and he was able to get Rashaan Holmes on a very, very reasonable deal as well. So if I'm going to give him a rating, I'm going to say probably an 8 so far.
Yeah, I would probably give him an incomplete on my report card. I think there's a lot more work that's yet to be done, and this season's trade deadline will be a defining moment in his tenure as GM of the Kings, with all these big name players that are available and the fact that the Kings continue to struggle and have not improved, not just in his tenure, but really over the past 15 plus seasons. So going into the trade deadline, he's got to get something done here. I agree with you that those trades that fell through may have definitely helped this team. Even more of a reason for him to get something done so that this team finally has a direction, whether it's improving immediately or improving long-term in the future.
Yep, I agree 100%. And speaking of the future, we're moving on here to Crystal Ball. We have a special guest. King Stradamus is on the show with us today, and he is going to give you some predictions about your Sacramento Kings. All right, King Stradamus, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on the Royal Report today. I got a ton of questions for you, and I'd love if you could look into your crystal ball and give me some answers.
Thanks for having me again, Barry. I would be more than happy to.
All right, I'm starting off hot here. This is the question that every Kings fan wants to know. Will De'Aaron Fox be traded?
No, I don't believe De'Aaron Fox is going to be traded. I think the Kings will make some moves here at the deadline, but it probably is going to feel a little bit like last year's deadline in that it'll be a little underwhelming. De'Aaron Fox is going to remain with Sacramento.
Wow, that's a bold prediction there. Okay, well, on the same topic, talking about trades here, I think it's pretty certain, or at least I feel like Buddy Hield is on his way out in Sacramento. I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but if he is traded, where do you think he'll end up?
Well, I would look to a lot of the teams in the middle of the playoff standings in both conferences. These teams would be looking for a little bit of a roster tweak to help solidify playoff seeding or a deep playoff run. Those would be teams like Milwaukee, Philly, Cleveland, Charlotte, out east, and then in the west, Dallas, Denver, both LA teams. All of them could be in the mix for a guy like Buddy Hield because of how good of a shooter he is. I think another wild card team to look out for is Atlanta. This is a team that's had a very disappointing season so far, and they're kind of in the middle of deciding whether or not they're going to go for a full rebuild and punt on the season, or if they're going to try to salvage another playoff run here.
That'd be really interesting to see, Buddy and Bogey back together again in Atlanta. And you combine that with Trae Young, that is an awesome shooting team.
Yeah, for sure. For now, I guess I will say that I think Philadelphia is probably the front runner here. They're obviously looking to move a lot of pieces, Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. It'll probably have to be a multi-team deal, whichever deal they eventually settle on. And we know they really covet outside shooting there. So I'll predict for now that Buddy will end up in Philadelphia.
Interesting. All right, well, this is kind of a personal question here because I do have some money on the line. I bet the over on the Sacramento Kings season. I think they're at 36.5 wins. I want to know from you, King Stradamus, what will the Kings' record be at the end of the season?
Well, this one is a little cloudy here in the crystal ball because a lot of this is going to depend on what roster moves are made ultimately for Sacramento. I'm going to be a little disappointing here. I know you've got money on the line here, but I think the Kings are on pace right now for about 32 wins. I'm going to predict they end up with about 35 wins, which I know doesn't get your bet done, but it still at least gives the Kings a shot at making the play-in tournament.
Interesting. I'm happy if they make the play-in. I'm happy if they make the playoffs, and I'll give up a win for the playoffs. All right, well, moving on here, another hot, burning question that all the Kings fans want to know. I think it's clear they're moving on in the coaching search, and they will resume that in the offseason. Who will be the next head coach of your Sacramento Kings?
Well, if the Kings do, in fact, keep De'Aaron Fox, which I believe that they will, look for Monty Mcnair to go after Mike D'Antoni. It makes sense for a lot of reasons. Mcnair worked with him in Houston. D'Antoni was actually drafted by the Kings back in 1973, and he could be exactly what De'Aaron Fox needs to kind of unleash his potential. So Mike D'Antoni, I think, will be the front runner.
I like that answer a lot, King Stradamus. I really do. I think Mike D'Antoni could really unlock De'Aaron Fox and show the world that, De'Aaron Fox is a franchise player, and I think he is the key to De'Aaron making that coveted all-star team. All right, I know you're a busy guy. You got to get back to your day job. But before you leave, I want to hear a prediction on tonight's Kings-Rockets game.
I expect it to be a high-scoring game. These two teams don't play a lot of defense. They have a lot of talented offensive players. If both teams are shooting well from the outside, it could be very high-scoring. I'm going to predict that the Kings win this game 123-117. De'Aaron Fox will have another game of at least 25 points, and Tyrese Haliburton is going to have another 20-10 points and assist game.
I like that. I really do. I like what I'm hearing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, King Stradamus. We really appreciate it. I'm sure Calvin, if he were here, would also tell you how much he appreciates you joining us here on the show. So thanks again, and we'll see you very soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's always good having King Stradamus on the show here, Cal. He's a really, really cool guy. Have you guys ever met before?
No, I actually have never met the guy. Sorry, I just had to go to the bathroom. But next time, let me know when he'll be here, and I'd love to get to know him. We're going to move on and wrap up the show here as we head into the next week of Kings basketball. A very favorable schedule for Sacramento. I know we've heard that before, and we've been disappointed. But here we go again. The Kings have 2 games back-to-back against the last place in the Western Conference, Houston Rockets, followed by a game against that other team,
the Detroit Pistons.
Followed by a game against the Detroit Pistons, who have the second to worst record overall in the entire league. So major opportunity for the Kings to continue building on this momentum that they ended this week on before they head into another gauntlet of a schedule in the following week.
Yeah, 3 awesome opportunities for your Sacramento Kings. If you're a Kings fan, make sure you go to these games. Tickets are going to be cheap, and the Kings are probably going to win these games. I don't want to be jinxing anybody here, but, the Rockets are on the bottom of the Western Conference. The Detroit Pistons are second worst in the East. And as of right now, neither of them are missing their best player. So this is good news for Sacramento.
That is true. And there are all opportunities here for Monty Mcnair to get a good look at some players that could be available via trade, like Christian Wood or Jeremy Grant. So all the people in the Kings organization should have a productive week ahead of them here.
I totally agree, and we will as well. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Royal Report. Make sure you catch us live tonight after the game. We will be live on the channel doing post-game. We'll be drinking beers. We'll be having fun, and we'd love to interact with you guys. So make sure you join us then. Make sure you smash up that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you all either tonight or next week.
Thanks so much.
Go Kings.